my opinion, what a sales leader needs to do is figure out what they're going to get slapped for and what they're going to get shot for. The answer to how to succeed in an uncertain marketplace is not internal, it's external. This is the greatest asset that salespeople have. You are not selling a product or service in 2026. The biggest disruptions I'm seeing in sales leadership right now are the fact that I still feel like people are focused so much on the technology of sales, when the truth for sales right now, especially in 2026, it is all about back to the human connection.
This accountability, can we expand on that? Why is it that leaders just struggle with coaching for accountability? Because ultimately their whole livelihood, their promotional path, their career, their bonus, their profit, it's all based on the fact that their team accountable, right? So, okay team, this week we are heading across, well, a big patch of ocean, and we're heading out to North Carolina, and we have a lovely lady by the name of Meridith Elliott Powell. And how I came across Meridith is she is responsible for some pretty bloody good LinkedIn learning. So she's done a lot of that. She's an amazing certified public speaking Hall of Fame speaker. There are so many credentials on this lady, it's mind-boggling, and we're incredibly lucky to have her. So Meridith, would you like to give the listeners a bit of a rundown on who you are, some context, and then we're going to get straight into it?
Yeah. So as you said, I'm a Hall of Fame speaker. I'm a best-selling author. But, at the base, I'm somebody who's really passionate about helping my clients learn to turn uncertainty to competitive advantage. I've got a background in corporate sales and leadership, having worked in healthcare, financial services, and travel and tourism. And I never thought my career made any sense at all until one day I was on a podcast like this and somebody said, kind of give us your background. And I realized that I've always entered industries when they've been going through massive disruption. And why most people don't like disruption, I do. I think it's the greatest opportunity to sell and to grow and to expand. And I think the sales leader, the sales individual who takes advantage of that is going to be the one that wins. And I'm on a mission to help people learn to do that.
I love that. I love how succinct that is as well. So Meridith, why don't we not waste any, and let's reward our listeners' time. When you say, let's get straight into sales, obviously my guys and girls are rural, they're selling feed, fertilizer, machinery all over the world. They're in Canada, America, UK, Australia, New Zealand. I think there might be a very obvious answer to this, but I'm interested more in yours because you're my guest, so it's not about me. What's some of the biggest disruptions you're seeing in sales leadership right now?
The biggest disruptions I'm seeing in sales leadership right now are the fact that I still feel like people right now are focused so much on the technology of sales, when the truth for sales right now, especially in 2026, it is all about back to the human connection and back to the human relationship. And I think for those of us who have been in sales for a really long time, this is kind of our time to shine, because if you're good at picking up the telephone, if you're good at working a room, if you're good at networking and building that relationship and listening, I think it's back to the basics. Everybody's talking about AI and technology. And I think the thing about sales is you look for what isn't being offered in the marketplace, and that's where the opportunity is. And I think what isn't being offered in the marketplace right now is the human connection.
So a bit of zig versus zag, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. Why are we not equipping our leaders, our sales leaders of today and tomorrow, with these EQ skills? The Daniel Goleman stuff we're talking. I was very lucky. I've got Andy Poole on the show, and he talks. He's very much of the same cut of view, saying we are maybe using technology as a crutch, or my words, not yours. We think it's the silver bullet, the panacea, but actually we've got to return basically to the fundamentals of the soft skill. Non-assumptive selling, as you said, reading the room, attunement, alignment, all those things. Why are we not equipping? What's going on in corporate world? Why are we not doing that? Why are we not helping them?
Because corporate is all focused on the result. And I don't mean that as a negative at all. I mean, I think if you're sitting there in the ivory tower, that's probably what you should be focused on. You've got to be beholden to the bottom line. You've got to make shareholders happy. But I'm just going to get gut-wrenchingly honest with you. In my opinion, what a sales leader needs to do is figure out what they're going to get slapped for and what they're going to get shot for. And they need to focus on what they're going to get slapped for and forget about what they're going to get shot for. The reason they don't have time for human connection is they're doing everything they're being asked to do. And the truth is, you can't do everything you're being asked to do. You've got to figure out what really matters. I mean, back when I was a sales leader, I was in that exact same position. Somebody from corporate headquarters would show up every single week and tell me I needed to do something different. But at the end of the year, as long as I drove the profit and loss, I was going to be in the president's circle every single time. So I would spend all year long getting slapped because I didn't win the credit card campaign, or I didn't, sell the most Valentines at Valentine's Day or something silly like that. But at the end of the year, I produced the result. And so if I were sitting there as a rural sales leader with somebody from corporate who didn't understand my world, I would sit down and I would really figure out, what do I need to produce at the end of the year? Like, what am I really being held accountable for? And then you put your nose to the grindstone and you make those numbers happen. But I think where sales leaders are getting derailed these days, they're doing everything they're being asked to do. And you can't do that in a marketplace that is moving this fast.
Yeah. Very good. Now, so then, Meridith, very sage advice. Next question will be like, there'd be rural sales leaders or managers listening to this going, yes, that sounds great, but I've got too much on my plate. What are some of the tools? How could they construct a conversation to manage up or push back? Because as both you and I know, before we hit the record button here, they're overwhelmed. They're still probably actively selling. They've got accounts and quotas to meet themselves. They've got a team to manage. They're probably babysitting marketing, God forbid. They're involved in operations, customer service. How do you, or when you were in your world in corporate as a sales leader, or what are the tools you've got that are going to help them sort of push back? Is it going back to reminding the big bosses about KPIs and how you'll be judged? What's the tools?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it is taking charge of your KPIs and your priorities. I always tell my sales leaders, the very first thing you need to do on a Monday morning is meet with your boss, even if it's just email, even if your boss won't meet with you, and say, here are my top 5 priorities for the week. This is where I'm focused. And have that boss sign off on those top 5 priorities. You want to check in every week. Even if for the last 3 weeks they've been the same, the truth is your boss is going into a meeting where his or her directives could change. So you want to double check on that. And then you use your priorities to set the priorities of your team. Everything should be moving uphill. But I can't tell you how often I'll go in and I'll meet with a sales team and they're so disconnected from what the executive leadership wants them to do because they're just doing what they think they're supposed to be focused on. So you want to focus on that. You want to focus on that every single week. And the truth is, if you're a sales leader, you probably have these KPIs. Number 1, you need to bring in new business. Number 2, you need to retain existing business. Number 3, you need to get the right margin for what you're bringing in, and you've got to hit a sales number every single week. So manage to that and forget about the rest.
Yeah. Do you think people lack sometimes the courage to push back?
Absolutely, I think they do.
Yeah, and so how do we train them? Because another thing that you talk about on your wonderful books is around confidence.
Yeah.
And so, where does that confidence come from to push back? Because, that big boss, male, female, or board, or VP, or C-suite, whatever it is like they can decide how much money to make that year and whether they pass you over or not. That's quite for some, easy for you and I to say, but maybe not for others. What's the advice there?
Yeah, so if you're going to push back, and you should push back only when you're producing numbers. The thing that I love about sales is the fact that you have all the power. You have all of it. Now, I'll tell you a quick story about this. Please. One time when I was working in sales, I was so aggravated at one of the guys in corporate leadership. I was livid with him. And it just so happened that in the office that I had, one of our senior executives worked in that office. He was the one person who'd been put out into the real world. And it was like 6 o'clock at night, and I was just in my office letting every 4-letter word shine because this guy just wouldn't approve my deal. and up walked Terry into my office, and he said, "Boy, what are you mad about?" I loved him. And I explained to him, I said, "This is so ridiculous. This deal needs to get across the table. This is so dumb." He goes, "Meridith," "you need to push back and push back on that hard." And I said, "Well, I can't do that." I said, "He's an executive." He said, "Meridith, everybody in executive headquarters is scared to do what you do every day. The one thing that every company needs is somebody who can bring in revenue." So where the power comes from is, do not push back if you're not producing your numbers because you're not powerful. So go out and produce your numbers first. But if you produce your numbers first, you hold all the cards. And I was probably 23 years old when Terry told me that. And I got to tell you, I was a ball of fire by the time I was 30. And he was so right. The chairman would listen to me because I was in the top 5% every year. They weren't going to touch me with a 10-foot pole. And
No.
even if they did, do you know how many other people would hire me?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
produce your numbers. Like play the game first so you can change the game. Right? And so that's why I'm saying, I mean, this all kind of goes together. Go back, figure out what those KPIs are. The reason I tell you to learn the priorities is because that's the recipe of how you deliver what they want you to deliver. That's how you win the game. Basically, they're saying, if you hit these numbers, you're golden. So hit those numbers. Now they're going to ask you to do a bunch of other stuff. Let that go. Like really know what those numbers are. And then once you're hitting those numbers consistently, you can push back because you're more powerful than anybody in the organization because you can produce revenue. And revenue producers, it's why people hate salespeople because we're the revenue producers. And when we whine, people listen to us, right?
I love that. That is such good advice. So what we're saying there, team, is like you get your power from your performance. And that's where you've got your license for leverage. And as I say, Meridith, she's in top 5%, and chairman's going to listen to Meridith because she's top producer. And, you know, equally, when I've had the privilege of training teams, if I'm seeing the top producer, I'm listening because they're the front line, the intel and the insight, the antennae, and I will listen to them. I won't listen to my exec. I won't listen to everyone else because you're on the front line. You know what's going on. And you know, you poke the bear. It's like hitting the beehive. It's gonna bite you in the arse, isn't it?
It's exactly right. Now, I will also tell you that I always did push back like a lady. I mean, like I did it in a way that I was not offensive or anything, but I did it in a way that, you know, I would literally call the chairman and I would say, here's why I'm having difficulty. I'm still going to hit my number, but here's what I could hit if you would get this obstacle out of the way. And you're absolutely right. He would listen to me because I already had the proof behind me. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, come on. If you and I decided we wanted to lose 20 pounds, we wouldn't go to a nutritionist who was 50 pounds overweight, right? We'd look for somebody who was in phenomenal shape. We'd look for somebody who already produced the results. So as salespeople, look, we're smart. Give us a number, we'll hit it. Figure out what that number is, hit it, and then you can change the game.
Yeah, I love that. Now, we talked about this concept of change. You have this system you talk about called Ask for Change. Could you explain to the listeners what that concept or that system is all about?
Yeah, so we are living in a world now that is moving 183% faster than it did just 4 years ago. Think about that. I mean, 183% faster. And my feeling is that I don't think your biggest challenge in 2026 is uncertainty. I think it is resisting uncertainty and change. I think Gartner released a report that said 75% of change initiatives fail. So think about that. We're living in a world that's moving 183% faster. Every company's trying to initiate change, yet 75% of those change initiatives are failing. So my thought was, what if you just became the sales professional or the sales leader who embraced change? Decided that every single change or disruption that showed up in the marketplace was just the leverage you needed to take things to the next level. And so that put me on a mission. I wanted to find leaders and professionals who had actually used some of our most disruptive times in history to actually grow their companies, like growing through world wars, growing through depressions, growing through the pandemic. Like, why do most companies and most organizations completely evaporate, and yet a few come through and just really, they don't just make it through, they grow through. And from that, I developed the formula, and the formula is Ask for Change. It's 3 simple steps, literally 9 strategies, but it's just 3 steps. And the first one of Ask for Change is to adapt your perspective. In adapting your perspective is that you have to start to view uncertainty as a positive. Sounds so simple, it is, but it's just not easy. And it consists of 3 levers. And the 3 levers are relentless vision. I'm going to tell you, anybody who is sitting as a sales leader or a sales professional where you're not interacting with corporate all the time, you can get isolated and you can get lonely and you kind of have bad days and things. Well, probably the most fascinating thing I found from the research I did is that success isn't logical. It doesn't belong to the salesperson with the best territory, the best customers, the lowest price, or the best product. It belongs to the person with the strongest vision and relentlessly focusing on it all day long. The mind will find what it focuses on. So if you focus on why you're going to be successful in your little rural community, your mind will find more ways to do that. If you focus on the reasons you're not going to be successful, it will find more reasons why you're not.
Love that. So it's kind of like the reframe. I'm using it in colloquial terms, but I can't remember the book. I've just been reading. I'm looking over the desk here with "Winning in Mind" by Lanny Basham, who was one of your shooters in the Olympics, and he talks exactly about that. It's like, so much of success is a mindset, and the mindset and the cognitive reappraisal or reframing, or however you want to describe it, and the mindset's got all that kind of like woo-woo connotations. But I really like what you're saying is adapting your perspective, seeing it as an opportunity, my words, not yours, rather than a threat, and an opportunity to really go some, because literally the response you take is going to dictate your success or failure, right? So like you say, they grow through these things. They don't fail through these things. So tell me about, I know we haven't got time for all the 9 strategy, but tell me more about that. Like, you've obviously got 3 parts to this.
Yeah. So I'll tease you with the second. So there's a little bit more to ask for perspective, but one more thing I want to say about the vision.
Please.
Is I call it a relentless vision. And right here is basically a note card. I'm sitting in my office right now in Asheville. 3 times a day I read this vision. It takes seconds, but the idea is that I'm getting my mind in shape to find opportunity. So if I lost a deal on Friday, the contract was signed, they reneged on it. First thing I do is pull out the vision and go back to the positive things. Yeah. So the second it's one of my favorite things. It's called to focus on people, and I kind of hinted at this at the beginning, but focus on people is the fact that we are living in this crazy high-tech world. And one of the problems with uncertainty and change is that we're waiting for the answer. We meet with our teammates, we meet with our company, we're coming up with the answer. The answer to how to succeed in an uncertain marketplace is not internal, it's external. This is the greatest asset that salespeople have. You are not selling a product or service in 2026. You are solving a problem. And the problem you are solving can only be found by listening to customers. But the problem you solve in the first quarter of the year will not be the problem that you solve in the fourth quarter of the year, because your customers' problems change, and they change constantly. And so, when I think about you think about Uber. Uber was invented because people complained about taxi cabs. And if you listen to your customers, they're complaining about something that isn't being offered in your marketplace. And if you can solve that problem, you'll not only win the business, but you'll take price off the table. Because it's a myth in an uncertain marketplace that people aren't buying. They'll buy. They just are buying to have a problem solved. And the biggest mistake I see salespeople making in an uncertain marketplace is we continue to try to sell a product rather than trying to figure out what the problem is. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I swear I'll take a breath. And I just said this at a sales kickoff the other day. In the United States of America, in December, what our customers were dealing with was very different than what they're dealing with in January of 2026. In January of 2026, think about this, compared to what it will be in June of 2026. By June of 2026, we'll be almost at the midterms, which will probably have a political change here in the U.S. Tariffs will have been solved, and we'll have a new Fed chair, and something different will be happening with interest rates. That's going to completely shift what our customers are dealing with and what they're challenged with and what they're excited about. And if salespeople listen, people will tell you exactly how to sell to them. But that's where your energy needs to be, not behind a computer sending emails.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, sometimes it was Bill Gates who said the source of your best learnings come from your most unhappiest customers.
Yes.
So we talked around disruption and opportunity, whether it's an Uber or an Airbnb. But I really like this concept of we can invest, and it's such cliched but common advice and a great reminder is we can invest all this time going, it's not right, and without sounding all stoicism here, Meridith, but as a reminder for the listeners is control the controllables. Only focus on the things you can control. Like you with the renege, I had a similar thing a couple of months ago, and I invested a lot of time and effort into it, a lot of goodwill, good faith, and they reneged on me. And so you go back to your relentless vision, and you go, right, I'm basically going to reframe that. I've done what I can, and the other thing I sort of help out is when I lose a deal, if I've done everything I possibly can, and I've left no stone unturned, then my sense of self-worth stays fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's that shame self when you didn't identify the buying committee or establish the business case or things like that. But without getting in the weeds, let's go back to focusing on the people thing. The technology, the tech stack, as a sales leader, it's not going to save you, and we're not training our teams on the EQ, on the attunement, on the alignment, the ability. You and I, me rushing onto this call, able to build a bond with you.
Yeah.
We talked about puppy and dog and tennis and everything else. Like, that's an ability. We haven't met before. We just know each other from the big bad sort of internet. But tell me about more that asks for change. There's a third part to it. How would you like to finish that?
Yeah, so the third part of it is commit to process. So you have adapt perspective for ask, and you have focus on people for, and then the last one is to commit to process. And what does commit to process means? Well, I think one of the most challenging things to do in an uncertain marketplace is you have to be highly focused. At the same time, you've got to be incredibly agile. I mean, we just said that honestly, by second quarter of this year, we'll probably be selling very differently than we did in the first quarter. So how are you ready to turn on a dime at the same time, stay highly focused? Well, we've got something for this called condition yourself for change. I love to ask a room full of people, how many of you think if we came right back in here this time next year, everything would be exactly the same? Nobody raises their hand. And I say, well, if I let you go to the bathroom and come back here, you think everything would be different. So if you know change is coming, why don't you get ready for change now? And so with salespeople, they need to be thinking about, how are my customers changing? How's society changing? What's happening with technology? What's happening in the industry? What's happening with customers? It's literally a tool I developed called the Skeptic tool. It stands for society, customers, economics, politics, technology, industry, and customers. And the way it works is every quarter, I always say to a sales leader, just get your sales team around you. Do it on a virtual call. I don't care how you do it. Get your head out of your business for 15 minutes and talk about how's society changing, what's happening with our customers, what's happening with technology, how are politics changing, and what, if any, of those changes do we need to be getting ready for now? And what happens with that is the more you talk about change, the more you think about change, the more you predict change, the more you're ready for it. You build your change muscles. You're in shape for change. But that tool, I give it to leaders all the time, but I'm telling you, I use it with my customers. You want to find opportunity with existing customers? I'll have them go through the tool. I mean, how's your life going to change in the next 6 months? And what can I do to help you make the transition? Because the thing about change is we only hate it because it shows up and disrupts our lives. When we can predict it, even if we're not right, we feel more in control of that change. So it's this idea that you just decide that change is a positive. You just get out there in the marketplace and listen to people, because if you listen, you'll find the opportunity. And then you think about and you get your team in shape for change, knowing that change is going to come, so that when it comes, even if you didn't guess it right, you're comfortable. You knew you weren't going to be doing things exactly the same in the next 3 months. So it's this continuous cycle of living like that, of just going, okay, interest rates just went through the roof. Not a big deal. We can handle that. New competitor just came in the market. We got this. Somehow this is going to be a good thing. Go out and listen to the marketplace, because they'll tell you what, and nobody's offering. They'll give you the path to growth and profitability. And then you got to get in shape for the fact that the marketplace is going to shift again.
Yeah, I love this. It's sort of like, that is such a more articulate way than a PEST model. And I don't mean PEST as in but also the skeptics and the acronym there. But then kind of what you're talking to the listeners about is, if I'm understanding it and getting the thread, is that you're priming, conditioning your teams for change. So change it becomes normal, normalized maybe. Again, maybe not being articulate, but it's kind of like it's going to happen anyway. Like I remember my old boss, he said the biggest constant syndrome is change. Mm-hmm. Get used to it. And so he was a good boss, good advice, great little sound about there. What I want to know is, maybe can we go into the psych side of it? I'd love to get your, with these wonderful LinkedIn learnings that you've done. We can see I've done a ton of them. So, we know that we've got the right person here. Why is it that as humans or sales leaders, why are we so frightened of change. And I know we can talk about reptilian brain and
Yeah.
amygdala and vagus nerve and all that kind of stuff, and gut, mind, body axis and everything else. But in your words, like, what's going on there, and how we can condition people more to stop this automatic override, which is, threat, fight, flight, freeze. What would you say to that?
It's such a good question. And if I were a sales leader listening to this right now, this would probably be the soundbite that I would take away, is that I think that people resist change because change is done to them and we don't involve them in the change process. I mean, think about this. I mean, we don't like to be out of control. I mean, our brain is wired to protect us, right? So anything that, I don't really want things to stay exactly the same, but at least I feel in control that way. And why I love that skeptic tool is the fact that people only resist change, and they do resist change. Only 36% of people are willing to support corporate change. Only 36%, even if it's laid out beautifully. They're only, even if they've been told why the change needs to happen. But I think it's because their change is done to them and they're not involved in the process. So let's assume that I'm a sales leader out there right now, and I've just gotten a directive from corporate headquarters that we've got to increase sales by 20% before the end of the year. We've got this goal and that's too high anyway, and now it's just gone another 20%. If you just take that to the team and say, look, I've gotten this directive, nothing I can do about this, but let's talk about how we could work together. What could we do to make that happen? That team's going to rally and feel less defensive about that 20% than they did if you just came in with the most beautiful plan ever. You could have the right tools and the best salespeople and everything, but if it's forced on people, they feel out of control. I mean, you think about, it's one of the reasons that I think about, like, I live in North Carolina and we got hit by that Hurricane Helene that wiped out the mountains of western North Carolina. And the only thing that caused the anxiety that we all went through, we were without power, water, light, anything for 53 days, was taking action. Like going out and cutting logs with your neighbors, going out and, clearing debris, going out and cleaning out neighbors' refrigerators and cooking together. And it was taking action. That calms anxiety. And so change creates anxiety. So if you are a sales leader and you need your team to get on board with change, just engage them and involve them in the process. And they're going to give you more than if you gave them the most beautiful directive.
Insane. Like that storm. When did that storm hit?
Yeah, it was September, a year ago September. I live on 5 acres right here, and we lost 130 trees on our property.
Yeah, we had a Cyclone Gabriel down here in New Zealand, and it was our worst one, and we weren't without water and power for days, but all our telecoms were down and everything else. And it was absolute bedlam. And I think we know that whether it's VUCA, isn't it? Volatility, uncertainty. I can't remember CNA, but VUCA, VUC as an acronym. This stuff's going to happen. So you and hubby and dog wallowing about, oh, poor us, pity us. Yeah. You get out there, you get the chainsaw out, you go and, because you have to be very self-sufficient off the land anyway. You've got 5 acres, right?
Right.
So, and you get on and you do stuff. And so what I like about the point of that is, like, okay, head office said we're going to get 20% up on already a very lifted sales target. Okay, rather than just drop this on you, some beautiful plan, let's work together on this. Let's break it down. What can we do? And it's kind of, otherwise, what we're doing is I think we're just creating learned helplessness there.
Completely.
Marty's signaling. It's just like, let's just drop it on there and just deal with it. I mean, that's not leadership. I don't know what it is, but it's the reverse of it. It's like change is, something you do with people, not at people, right? And so I could use more simple terms like CRM or putting E-Road on your trucks and stuff like that. Oh, they're going to use CRM. Oh, my goodness, they're going to be watching everything that we do. Well, if you're worried about what they're watching, where's that response coming from? Is that fear-based or whatever else? But, get into that. Now, I want to move on, Meridith. There's a lot I want to cover. So tell me about this confidence. You've literally written the book on confidence, okay? So you talk around the confidence plan. What is this all about? Like, because, some of my reps are young, or some of my sales managers have just literally been promoted from being a high-performing rep. And they say, oh, Harry's great, we're going to make him a manager.
Oh, sure, yeah, that's always happened.
always happens, and or you've got Peter Principle, which is completely reverse. But like, how can you help them to improve their In fact, the question I really want to ask is, how do you help them develop that leadership voice? Because, you know, what's 1 minute they're one of the boys, so to speak, and then next minute they're their boss. How do they change that? How readjust that? What advice would you have for?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest move to make, right? It's like the hardest move to make is to go from being, you know, one of the guys to becoming, to really becoming the boss. And so I think there's a couple of things you need to do there. I mean, let's talk a moment about confidence. Is that you can't lead anybody if you're not confident in yourself. And confidence is not about being perfect. It is about making progress in the areas of your life that matter. And so what I mean by that is I use 5 buckets. And when I'm working with somebody on a confidence, I have them write down their health. I have them write down relationships. I have them write down financials. I have them write down career, and I have them write down spirituality. And you can define any of those buckets however you want to define them. But you have to be making progress in every single bucket in order to have confidence, meaning that I just don't believe people are confident who excel at their careers but have terrible relationships. You know, I don't believe that people are really confident that have incredible, relationships, but their finances are a disaster. I mean, if you're going to stand up in front of people and ask people to follow you, you don't have to be perfect in every bucket, but you have to be honest with yourself in every bucket, and you have to be making progress in every bucket. And that's how you become a seriously confident corporate athlete, is to have balance in all of those buckets. So I'll start there. Then you move into the role of boss from being peer. And I think the very first thing that you need to do is to understand just how difficult that job is. But this is the time to get really clear with the people that you lead, and you need to separate fact from emotion. So you and I go out every Friday night, we have a drink, maybe our significant others, maybe we're all friends, and we go out on Saturday and Sunday night and we hang out. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine as a leader, as long as I still hold you accountable. So the very first thing that I like to do when I move into that role is I like to sit down with people and say, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to expect of you, and I want you to tell me what you expect as me as a leader. And then we're going to live to that. That means that even if I drink with you on every Friday night, I'm still holding you accountable for what I told you that you're held accountable for. You've got to separate the friendship and the emotion and the fact that I like you from the fact of whether you're performing or you're not performing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a hard one. That's such a hard one, because that emotional distance, they probably maybe weren't equipped with the capabilities or the training or the coaching. And sometimes I think it's really hard to be their friend and then have a hard conversation about performance or KPIs. And I just think, I certainly know with my own sales managers that I train there, some of them really struggle to develop that leadership voice, real leadership voice. And they're like, I'm new to this. How do I do it? Because 1 minute I'm this and the next minute I'm there. But say you're separating fact from emotion. What would you say to people who say, well, you actually now have to create some distance between that relationship? When I say not distance as in cold, but, in terms of resetting boundaries or standards, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so here's my thoughts on that, is that I think we need to look at leading people more like we look at being a parent. And you don't create distance as a parent, but you sure as heck hold your children accountable. And you don't hold your children accountable because you hate them. You hold them accountable because you love them and you want them to grow up to be a productive adults. So as a parent, you can play with your kids on Saturday and Sunday, and then you can ground them when they do something bad on Monday. So you strike that balance. And I think it's the same thing as a leader. I mean, when I moved into a leadership position and I went from peer to leader, my very first, I think every move I made, I would always sit down with people and I would say, my job is to help you get to the next level. I want you to move higher in this organization than I ever move. And that means that I'm going to help you develop, I'm going to help you build skills, but I'm also going to hold you accountable. I mean, just letting those expectations go right at the very beginning. Now, what I think you do have to behave like a parent as a leader, in the sense that I can still go out with you on every Friday, but if we used to get drunk as a skunk on Friday night, I probably have lost that ability. Yeah. You have to respect me. And so it is, it is in that situation. But I just think of it more like I've always loved everybody who worked for me. I've loved their families. They've been important to me. I've cared about them. So I didn't think of it as a distance relationship, but I had no problem holding them accountable because I didn't think of it as cruel. I thought of it as loving. Even when I had to fire people, I would be like, I really believe that people have the ability to be successful. And if somebody doesn't tell them what they're doing wrong, then they're set up for failure. And I think we struggle with a leadership voice because we're more worried about what people think about us than we are how much we want how much we want them to develop. And that's the long look in the mirror you got to have.
That is gold.
Mm-hmm.
This accountability part, Meridith, again, I have my own experience of training sales managers, and I'm like, we teach them to have coaching conversations with their charges and people under their responsibility. I love the analogy of parenting. You still love your kids unconditionally, but they're being an absolute jerk. You're going to ground them, but you still love them to pieces, and you're going to do the things to them. This accountability, why is it? Can we expand on that? Why is it that leaders just struggle with coaching for accountability? Because ultimately their whole livelihood, their promotional path, their career, their bonus, their profit, it's all based on the fact that keeping their team accountable, right? So they shirk from this accountability. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think number one is we confuse what accountability is. And what I mean by that is what accountability is you need to figure out if you have a skill issue or a discipline issue. And so what do you hold? Like a lot of times, I just had somebody ask me whether they should fire their sales manager. And I said, well, tell me what your sales manager's doing. And she said, well, he hasn't produced the numbers. I said, what is he doing? And she said, I don't know. Then I said, you don't know whether you can fire him or not, because I don't know if he doesn't know what he's doing or if he's lazy. I can't tell you that because you don't know what he's doing. So, you have to have behaviors on everybody who reports to you so you can determine the accountability issue, whether it's a skill issue or it's a discipline issue. The second piece is I think that we struggle to hold people accountable because we're worried about hurting people and not thinking to ourselves that not holding people accountable is the cruelest thing we can do. I always say to people, like, imagine that Joe is underperforming and I never have the guts to say anything to him, but I go out, I grab a cup of coffee with you and I tell you about it. I tell the executives about it. Everybody in the company is talking about the fact that Joe's underperforming. Everybody's talking about it except nobody's talking about it to Joe. So I think we completely misunderstand what cruelty is. Cruelty is not telling somebody what they need so that they can be successful, which is your job as a leader. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. When you were talking about that, Meredith, you remind me of Andy Grove's book behind me, Where the Paranoid Survive. And he talks about that, and I'm sure I'll hash it here, but he talks about, is it a performance issue, is it a motivation issue, or is it a capability issue? And it's very similar to what you're saying is, so with your example with your peer that said, look, I think I need to fire my sales manager, you asked the right coaching question is, what are they doing currently? Tell me what they're doing currently. Because we don't know if they have a discipline issue or they have a skill issue, or whether it's a capability issue, i.e. skill, or it's a motivational ability, I can't be bothered to do it. And I think Andy Grove says something like, if your life depended on it, could you do it? And if they said they could do it, then it's not a skill issue, it's a motivational issue, because that's what you think. And vice versa, is that stress test. But I see leaders they do not hold their team to a higher standard, and then they end up resenting their team when they should really probably be resenting themselves because they haven't had those hard conversations, right? And I think what you said is set the expectation early and up front. Yes. Be very, very clear. This is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me. Here's the accountability. Here's the agreements we're going to make to each other, and we're going to hold each other to account. But it's my job to hold you to account and also hold you to a higher standard than perhaps you hold yourself, because I care with positive intent where you want to go. I want to see you succeed. And if I don't do that, if I let you off, I let you down, right?
Completely. I also think that I see this a lot. You probably do too. We try to coach to people's potential, and people's potential is not our choice. And I knew this from dating. I dated so many guys that had potential that were never going to get off the couch and get a job if their life depended on it. But I saw potential in them. And so I see this a lot. And that's why it's so important to lay the expectation out. But whether somebody does it or not is not up to you as a leader. You know this being a coach. Like people will thank you profusely for how much you helped them. But you also have people that you didn't help at all. And you realize that as a coach, it isn't up to you. All you're doing is holding the space, providing the information. Some people walk through the door and some people don't walk through the door. And I think it's one of the hardest things as a leader, because you see somebody who has so much potential, but they don't want to walk through the door. So I think we give them grace when we shouldn't give them grace.
Yeah, I think I've said it before with other guests, wonderful guests like yourself, and I said, when my level of care exceeds the level of care that they have for themselves, I stop caring.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. They've got to walk through that door. Like, we can kick them up the arse and they're kicking, screaming, but it's like, I've given you the tools, I've given you the coaching, off you go and do it. I've given you the tool, I've given you the training. But if my level of investment exceeds the level of care, my care exceeds your level of care you have for yourself, I stop caring. I think that is great advice. Meridith, and I'm jumping around. Last thing before we love and leave you.
Yeah. You
talked about those 5 buckets: health, relationships, financial, career, and spiritual. You said about balance. Do you think it's really hard to get balance in this uncertain world, or is it a case that sometimes you've got to prioritize it? Because you said when I rewound that conversation, you said usually if someone's incredibly successful in life, it's probably quite rare that they're successful in their relationships. Mm-hmm. So somewhere along the way, we had to sacrifice relationships or family or health to be so successful in business. What do you say around balance versus priority? Because you listen to some people, they say there is no such thing as balance; it's just priority.
Yeah, I think what it is I think that it is more about. I think there are times in your life when you're more focused on one than the other. Okay. What I believe, though, is I believe that the better physical shape I'm in, I believe the better financial shape I'm in, I believe the better relationship shape I'm in, the better I succeed at my career. There have definitely been times in my life when I've always been successful at my career. It's never, ever been the problem. But I have been times in my life when I have been in my career successful, but void of any spirituality, upside down financially, and my health was not very good. And there's a great article put out in the Harvard Business Review called The Corporate Athlete.
I love that article. Yeah, I know exactly the one you're talking about.
And it's exactly what I mean, so the idea is that we're like an athlete, right? I mean, if we don't take care of ourselves in every single bucket, then we'll never, I'm more successful in my career because I prioritize my health. I'm more successful in my career because I prioritize my relationships. I think those things are really, important. I think whenever there's a part of our life that's out of balance or out of progress, there's a little gnawing voice. Like, if you didn't go to one of your kids' games the whole time they were in school, there's a part of you that's eating you away at the fact that you did that, right? Even though you justified it in your head, you had to be on planes, you needed to go here, whatever. So all I'm saying is I'm a big believer in managing your energy, not managing your time. And I'm a big believer that if I sit down for 2 hours at dinner with my family and we talk and we laugh and I'm present, I have more capacity to go back to work at night.
I love it. You're talking Tony Schwartz. You're talking exactly my same language. Meredith's just given us a gift, guys and girls. Go to the Harvard Business Review. Get yourself that copy of that Corporate Athlete. Go and read Tony Schwartz's books as well, which are up behind me here, funny enough. So spot on. Everyone's like, I've got to get more productive. I always say the more stressed you are, the more you need to move. And my late father said exercise for energy. So, when you have got a hectic schedule, I mean, when I was a younger fella, I'm 52 now, is probably the hotel bar was my favourite place. Now it's the hotel gym. Yeah. Because I've got to go to a hotel where I've got a gym and a workout, because I know if I've got I'm sure it's you, Meridith, in your careers, it's full on. There's a lot going on and a lot of coming at you. And if you're not physically fit and your relationship aren't good, it will show up. And I often think sometimes when we're talking around sales in this show, if you've got sales problems, I'm gonna be very controversial. Usually, there's usually personal problems, and they manifest themselves. The two are so connected, right?
So 100%. The other is that somebody asked me the other day, Like, why do people, why are people so petty at work? Like, if you and I are selling in the same territory and you take a client that I talked to once back 5 years ago, why do I scream bloody murder about that? And I said, when those 5 buckets are out of balance, when all I have is career, it matters too much to me. It matters too much to me. And so
we're overly invested, over prioritized, and over dependent on that thing. So workaholism is an example of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know that because early in my career, I was definitely, that way. I would get so offended or so hurt. And it's a sign of other things. You don't have to be in perfect balance in those, but those are the areas of your life you've got to look at, and you've got to be making investments in, because if not, something is gnawing at you and taking away. And the idea behind the corporate athlete, as you know, I'm so glad you suggested, everybody, is even if you are crazy successful right now, if you balance those other areas of your life, you would go further in your career.
100%. And again, I'm trying to think of a desperate tennis metaphor here. When a player loses a game, their whole world doesn't crumble. Like we have the All Blacks down here, very, very successful rugby team, done a bit of not in that physically playing from, but in that coaching environment. And at the end of the day, they lose a game, but they still got family. And we had an All Black on here, 2 Rugby World Cup winner, Conrad Smith. He's about number 3 after some of the other guys. He'll hate me for saying that, but he said, St. John, like when we lost a game, I lost a game, but I didn't lose my family, I didn't lose my health, he had perspective on that, but he wasn't over-indexed on the sale or the outcome or the result. Now, Meridith, we know you've got to go very early in the morning. I ask all my guests this, my wonderful guests. If you had, and it might be something you said that you want to repeat, if you had one piece of advice for sales leaders and you could only give them one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
That'd be easy for me. It would be build your network, change your life. And the reason is because the greatest piece of advice I was ever given by my mother was to always walk into a room and find people you don't know and start having conversation. Because any problem, any challenge, any issue, any customer you need introduced to, you will, at any moment in time, you are only one connection away from somebody who can literally and positively change your life.
That is awesome. What good advice from your mum.
My mother taught me to talk to strangers.
Yeah. Well, with cold calling, we've got to change the whole biological programming. I've got to talk to someone on the left, or I've got to go to a conference and sit, wherever I've got to be, sit by Vanessa Van Edwards, or tell us to sit like right on the corner by the bar in between. Yeah, no, I get all that. Meridith, talking of advice, where do people find you? Where's the best place they can connect with you? They like what they're hearing. Where do they go?
Well, I would love for them to connect with me, because I am a big believer, build your network, change your life. So I'm social media channel, I'm on all of them, but I tend to live on LinkedIn more than any other. But you can also find me at my website, which is valuespeaker.com, just the words valuespeaker.com. And as I said, reach out, I'll connect with you.
Meridith, we really appreciate you staying up late for us, sacrificing watching tennis with hubby and dog. Thank you so much. Thanks for your generosity. I loved how succinctly you answered the questions. And, I get guests like you, I don't have like lots of questions saying, hey, Meridith, I'm going to ask you this question. We just riffed on it and you answered it beautifully. You answered all the questions beautifully. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was a great conversation. I do need to close by telling you that the single best day of fly fishing I ever had was on the North Island of New Zealand. Oh,
were you in Taupo, or where were you?
Taupo. Yep.
Yeah, so you were at the, I know where you were. Well, you weren't with Grant Petherick, were you? With you had a fishing guide?
Oh, yeah, we had a fishing guide, my husband and I, and I mean, it was December 1st, 2018, opening day, caught, I think trout. We had 3 trout, but three times we hit New Zealand doubles.
Meridith, thank you.
Thank you.
For all that you do and all the generous stuff that you put out there, and thank you again for giving us your time.
I really enjoyed it. Great to connect.
Hey you, hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned lots from it. It takes a wee bit of work to get these wonderful, amazing guests who are leaders in their own field on our tiny little show, who share their knowledge with you freely and generously. So it makes a lot of sense for me to ask you a tiny, tiny favour in return, which is to rate, subscribe or share the podcast or grow this YouTube channel with your family, your friends or colleagues, or anyone in your network that you think will benefit from listening or subscribing to it. The reason for my request is really, really simple. I'm on an absolute mission to elevate and improve the world's perception and therefore performance of rural sales reps and rural managers like yourself, which in turn helps every rural business owner or leader on the planet. I do that by doing my very best to share the most effective sales and marketing strategies with world-class leaders and thinkers so you can get the leads, respect and sales results you deserve. But I can only do that when you help me get this channel and our podcast out to a bigger, wider audience. And the bigger the audience, the better our guests are going to be. So if you can help us with that, that would be brilliant. Now, as you know, unlike other podcasts, we don't include any of those annoying ads that interrupt your listening experience. But I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't make sure that you grab a free copy of my How to Succeed in Rural Sales ebook, which would normally cost you $20 on Amazon. You get that for free as a subscriber or a podcast listener. Or you can find out more about our rural sales team training or rural sales manager training programs. You can do all of this at our resources page, which is below the video here, which is www.ruralsalessuccess.com, where you can click on and download copies of my other books here. I have another book out last year based on Ryan Halliday's brilliant book, The Daily Stoic, and it's called 365 Rules to Master Rural Sales Success. So mastering yourself, mastering rural sales, and mastering rural sales management is kind of a 3-in-1. So make sure you get that as well. And also in the notes below here, you have an access to my free new AI training tool called Field Coach IO, which can talk to you and train you 24/7, anywhere, any time zone. No lag, no waiting. Get answers that you need right there and then for the deals that you're working on. It's got all my IP inside its knowledge base, which is extensive. 13 years of IP that you're never going to access from the likes of Chat or Claude or Gemini or Grok. And you can instantly get access at a touch of a button with no waiting. You can, it will coach you or train you on your specific live sales scenario you're facing, whether it's pricing or timing objections, existing supplier, high authority, farmers that have ghosted you on quotes, the specific questions you need to ask to make those conversations count. It will even analyze your sales calls for you to put you right where you might be going wrong, as well as map out your territories. It syncs to Google Maps and Google My Maps, and process your export leads from CRM to prioritize which leads you need to follow up with the highly hyper-specific, customized, relevant follow-up you need to get those deals, those dead deals revived in your CRM. So whatever you need is going to give you immediate specific answers, and you don't need to suffer or struggle whilst you wait for answers even from me. So immediate instant coaching right there and then just when you need it, or even talk to you in your truck as you're about in your territory, which is awesome. As long as you've got great internet coverage. So our members and Field Coach are absolutely loving what it's doing for me. So many more use cases I could bore you with senses here, and my development team and me are adding new tools to it all the time. So you can take Field Coach for a spin, a 15-day test drive, and try it out, see it out for yourself for just $1. The link to Field Coach is in the notes below as well. So I personally want to thank you, my friend, my dear listener and subscriber, for sharing the show with others. Really, really appreciate that, because we can make a difference. It's hard, rural sales is hard enough. Thank you for investing your time with me and my guests, because I know you're super busy. It's very busy and noisy out there. You've got many choices and options where you choose to spend and invest your very valuable, precious time. So hope it's been time well spent for you, and you've learned something from us and our guests, and it's helping you become a better rep or manager, or you as a human being. Appreciate it and appreciate you.